Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I just don't feel like myself anymore? If so, you are not alone. And the good news is, this doesn't have to be your new normal. In today's episode, we'll explore what's really behind that feeling and show you that there is a way forward. With the right support, medical care, and lifestyle practices, you can reconnect with yourself, reclaim your spark, and feel empowered through every stage of your menopause journey. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to inspiring midlife women to feel more connected to their bodies, pleasure, and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexual wellness coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. As we continue to celebrate World Menopause Awareness Month, I'm really excited to bring you this special episode, and I think it will resonate with many of you. Today, we're diving into a topic that doesn't get enough attention: not feeling like myself in perimenopause and menopause. If you've ever experienced anxiety, irritability, low moods, or that overwhelming sense of not feeling quite you, let me tell you, it's not all in your head and everything you're feeling makes sense. You're actually not alone in this. In fact, a recent Women Living Better survey shows that over 60% of women feel this way at least half of the time during this phase of life. This phenomenon, known as NFLM, not feeling like myself, highlights how symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, and fluctuating moods impact emotional well-being during the transition into menopause. But here's the good news. There are ways through it, and we're going to explore those today. I'm delighted to share a recorded conversation from a live webinar I participated in recently with two extraordinary women: Dr. Suzanne Gilberg-Lenz, a board-certified OBGYN, integrative health advocate, and author of Menopause Bootcamp, and Kat Farrants, founder of Movement for Modern Life, who has been through her own personal journey with menopause. Kat has built an amazing platform to support women with tools like yoga and mindfulness, and she shares invaluable insights in this conversation. We finish this conversation with a Q&A from the wonderful Movement for Modern Life community. Together, we dive deep into what NFLM really means, unpack the research, and offer practical tips to help you navigate this stage of life. Whether you've been dealing with sleepless nights, stress, anxiety, achy joints, or just feeling out of sync with yourself, this episode will give you the tools to reconnect with your body and reclaim your sense of self. So let's jump into this insightful conversation with Dr. Suzanne Gilberg-Lenz and Kat Farrants. Remember, you deserve to feel empowered, supported, and at home in your body. So let's get started.
Hello, everybody. It's so good to hang out with you. And it's so great to get to hang out with Dr. Suzanne Gilberg-Lenz and Gabriella Espinosa, who are our women's health and menopause experts. I am more than delighted to be able to introduce these women to you, because these are people who have spent their lives like looking at the stuff which we're all going through, and they're working out the nuts and bolts of it, working out how is it that each of these individuals are feeling in this way, and how can we make us feel better, please? I wanted to introduce you to our amazing experts. So, Dr. Suzanne Gilberg-Lenz, thank you so much for joining us. Oh my gosh, it's such an honor. So she's a diplomat of the American College of
Just say OBGYN. I think everybody knows what that is.
Everybody knows that. And you received your medical degree back in 1996 from the USC School of Medicine, completed your residency in obstetrics and gynecology at the UCLA Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and involved in women's empowerment and public education. You kindly appear frequently as an expert in women's health and integrative medicine, also in print, online, on TV, and as the chief medical correspondent for the Drew Barrymore Show, author of Menopause Bootcamp, Optimize Your Health, Empower Yourself, and Flourish as You Age. Yes. And Gabriella, I think that you're known to the Movement for Modern Life audience because you're one of our teachers. Thank you so, so much for being supporting our platform and being here with us. You're a teacher, a yoga teacher, Movement for Modern Life. You're a women's health and sexual wellness coach and a host of Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering midlife women to get their own pleasure, power, and purpose. Hell yes to those things.
Yeah.
Gabriella views menopause as an invitation to get to know ourselves and upgrade our mind, body, and spirit to our best version possible. Gabriella's guidance takes women on a journey of self-exploration, trust, and knowing. Yes, we do get to the other side wiser, stronger, and more empowered. God, I can't wait for that, hey? And a little note on me. I'm Kat Farrants. I'm founder of Movement for Modern Life. We started 2013, which feels like pretty much before the interweb. And then people after that discovered that yoga online was a thing. And basically, I just wanted to make really good yoga, not the kind of sexy yoga, not the kind of YouTube stuff, the really good yoga and the good well-being practices accessible to everybody. And I'm so pleased that our community is still going over a decade on now. We're sort of 13 years old. So it's really cool. I'm also a woman in perimenopause, and I did not know that I was in perimenopause when I started to get crashing fatigue. I had to be in bed for 2 days a month. I had headaches. It was just turning into like the worst person of my like, what on earth is this? And honestly, I had no idea. I hadn't even heard of perimenopause, and I didn't think it applied to me. So I was in my 40s. I'm not old. Like menopause applies to old women, no? And now I'm a few years on. So basically, I did loads of research, and that's the reason why I came up with our Menopause for Modern Life course, because I realized there's going to be other people like me who've got no idea why they're suddenly just not feeling themselves. Like, who is this person? It felt like an imposter, just an alien had taken hold of my body. And like, who is that? And why can't I do the things that I used to do? It was just so frustrating. So we started this course so that I could learn more about menopause and the process and get amazing practitioners like Gabriella, like Dr. Suzanne, to join us on the journey so that we can find out more. And yeah, I think this menopause journey, it's a hell of a journey. So that's my little story of how, my absolute exhaustion, fatigue, headaches, nausea. Did I mention the nausea? And also just this sort of anxiety and not feeling, just not me, not being me. So that's why I've taken this journey. And thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Suzanne, I'd love to hear your thoughts because you've coached and been with so many women going through this. What's the deal? What's going on?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have a question for you. How did you finally realize that what was happening to you was perimenopause? How did you figure that out?
It wasn't quick. I'm not a quick one. It took a good few years.
Was it mostly research and reading? Were you going to your doctors? Were you talking to your friends?
I started to journal. Because I'm a yoga practitioner. I was journaling my odd symptoms, and I realized that they were cyclical, and it was every month right before my period.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's hormonal.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that you brought that up, because one of the things that I do when patients come in to see me and and of course now 2024, there's a lot more information out there. People are still incredibly confused. They sort of have a vague notion, whereas before maybe they didn't have any notion, but they still don't know how to make sense of it. And this term, not feeling like myself, is very, very well known to those of us who are either experiencing it, have experienced it, or are dealing with patients and clients who are experiencing it. And I want to put a pin in that for a moment because there was a big study that was published not too long ago using the terminology, which was kind of wonderful because it was sort of a reflection of actual lived experience, which is something we had not necessarily seen before. We're starting to see more of as groups like yours come together, educate each other and ourselves, and demand better. So having said that, I often use that tool of tracking. I actually ask my patients to track their cycles and their symptoms for at least 2 to 3 months and come back to me if it's realistic, right? I mean, if somebody's an extremist and needing something right now, I'm not going to withhold. But a lot of times, just the act of understanding our own body and that this is part of our own physiology is very, very helpful and very It helps us attune with ourselves. It helps us reconnect with ourselves. And I think in a community like yours, in a yoga community, that's something that would be familiar to you all. It's sort of a goal of being in our body, even when it's in discomfort. But again, attuning to ourselves is very, very important. It also gives information as to how we can proceed. What might the issues be? What might the solutions be?
Shall I add to that, Kat?
Yes, please, Gabriella.
Yeah, I love how Dr. Suzanne uses that word attuning to ourselves, right? Because I feel that is really the gift that yoga offered me, right? That lens of awareness to tune into what is actually happening, right? And so similar to you, Kat, perimenopause hit me from out of nowhere and had no idea. I'd never even heard of the word, but the symptoms were there, right? The creeping anxiety that I had never experienced before, achy joints, forgetfulness, heart palpitations. And I feel that getting on my mat every day, because at the time I was a serious yoga practitioner, it really helped me to slow down and do that inner attunement. What is it that I need today? What is going on? And even though I didn't have answers at my yoga practice, and getting on the mat did provide me that time to slow down and ask myself, what is it that I need today? And right, yoga offers us all the tools, right? It's an ancient technology that offers us the tools, whether it's breath work or meditation or yoga nidra or shavasana or just I think the one practice I adopted when I went into perimenopause was just lying over in a reclined bound angle pose, right? In over my bolster. And it's something that I still do to this day, right? Just get on my bolster. It's the one practice that I developed with yoga, and I still do it to this day, tuning in, attuning, like Dr. Gilberg-Lenz says. And it will shift, right? The tools that you reach out for will shift from perimenopause to menopause to postmenopause, but it's that tuning in, that attuning that is so essential, and I feel really is the gift of yoga.
I think one of the gifts of yoga, and, so I'm trained in Ayurveda. My background in integrative medicine originally came from my training in Ayurveda. So I went through an accreditation program. I don't practice Ayurveda, but it informs my thinking in all ways. And for those of you who don't know, yoga is actually a branch of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the ancient holistic medical paradigm of India, and it means the science of life. It's really a lot of kind of lifestyle medicine and preventive medicine without even understanding it really derives from Ayurveda. So it's very, very important. And I think this idea of being, not doing is very, very important. I actually think, and I've written and I've spoken and I teach about this in my menopause boot camp, which is where the book came from. So let me back it up. This is not unfamiliar territory to me. I went through it myself, and I saw in my patients, and I saw in my community, because I've been involved in public speaking and teaching and television and media for decades. And anytime I would give a talk, Kat, the hands would shoot up at the end about any topic, and they'd all be asking me about menopause, hormones, cycles, all of it. And I was like, oh my God, people have no idea what's going on. And I can't download this in, a 5-minute encounter during your pap smear. That's not happening. And I created a menopause boot camp. I created a 3 to 4 hour experience where we sat together. I educated people so they had the language, they understood the terminology, they understood what was happening to their body. I call this the puberty of midlife because it is merely a developmental physiologic phase. Adolescence and puberty it is horrendous, and it would be even more horrendous if we didn't educate our children. But we don't do that. We educate and support them. So this was my process to educate and support us through this physiologic process. And then because I have a deeper and wider toolkit, I'm conventionally trained. I practice in a conventional setting. I understand hormone therapy, and I understand natural remedies, lifestyle medicine. I've been a yoga and meditation practitioner for decades myself. I had a more soup to nuts kind of approach to it, which was helping people individualize, not doing individual treatments, just understanding the context. I really get where you're coming from. But here's what Ayurveda and, this more philosophical approach offer us. Can we stop, be in our body, again, in discomfort? Yoga teaches us how to manage discomfort. Some yoga poses are very challenging. And I'm not telling anybody they have to be in discomfort or they have to suffer. That's not what I'm saying. But how do we remain resilient? How do we adopt tools to get through discomfort and not get stuck in that moment? This is it. It's all over. It's done. I'm always going to suffer. How can we detach from that mindset? How can we be in our bodies? And here's another really big one. How can we detach from the idea that we have of ourselves? Because if we have a fixed idea of who we are and what our experience is going to be, it's going to be a real rocky road. And I'm 58. And if I think that it's going to be the way it always is, I mean, that's not, honestly, real talk. It's not a very mature way to look at myself. Again, not saying that it isn't really challenging, not saying that there isn't fear, grief, anxiety around this, not saying that these symptoms that we have are incredibly difficult and actually can be red flags for us to pay attention to our health and make sure we're attending to our health, our brain health, our heart health, our bone health, our sexual health, our mental health. But if we can have a container that is safe, and that container, in my opinion, is community, it's what you are doing. The medicine, a lot of the medicine is in the community. It's the words, it's the healing, it's the stories, it's the validation, it's the hearing how people got through it themselves. It's the offering of support, being of service, getting outside of ourselves. I mean, I could go on and on and on. When I created Menopause Bootcamp, I thought I was educating people. But what I realized is I was building community. And that was as powerful, if not more powerful. And Gabriella knows because this is how we met. If you look at just the menopause expert community and what we have done, not just for all of you, but for ourselves to find a tribe. So I'm so excited to hear about your huge community. And it's, again, not just about addressing really specific needs. It's a more global need of combating isolation and fear. If you're educated and you know what's happening and you have partners in it, it's just a totally different experience.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that part of what we've found is exactly that. It's just finding a place where it's safe to share. I do think of it as a space to come into the new you. And I'm actually, and it sounds so daft, but I'm so genuinely excited as to where the metamorphosis is going to take me. Because I feel like I've got not much control. I'm just sort of on this ride down the river on a canoe, and it's a pretty rickety one at that. And I'm just going down, and I've got absolutely no idea how the unfolding is going to take place. And I kind of, you just need to sort of hand your life over. Like, okay, so I thought I was this person. I thought that, my life was around my work, and life just has turned itself upside down mentally, physically. I'm definitely not myself, but exactly as you say, I'm quite excited about who I'm going to be. I feel like one of those kids. It's like, who are you going to be when you grow up? I'm like, I've got no idea. I'll let you know.
The next version of yourself.
Yeah.
But, having delivered thousands of babies, or attending the births of thousands of babies, I don't do that anymore. I use that analogy a lot too. I love that analogy because that birth canal experience for both the birther and the birthee, it's an experience. And no, it's not, it's beautiful often, but it is hard. It's really hard. And I think when you're stuck in that dark canal part, you can become convinced that you're going to be there forever, and you're not going to be there forever. So.
Oh, that's so good. Can I turn to some of the good people's? Because I so appreciate all the wonderful shares. And I'd love to share some of your shares. So Karen, thank you for sharing this. The physical impacts caught me by surprise. I knew about the risks of osteoporosis, but I didn't expect the soft tissue impacts, particularly my tendons, which seem so easily prone to injury and inflammation now. That's very interesting. What's that all about?
One of our colleagues and dear friends, Dr. Vonda Wright, who, if you are not following along with her journey, she's an orthopedic surgeon here in the US who has really devoted herself to midlife health and beyond. And she has coined a term that was recently published in one of our major journals called the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. I wish I could, provide some visual aids. You guys can go online later and look. But if you look at where estrogen receptors live in our body, they live everywhere in our body. So estrogen is having whole body influence, not just in the obvious places, your vagina, your uterus, that kind of thing, your breast. It has impacts in the brains. It has impact in the bone. It has impact in the entire musculoskeletal system. So we see a combination of sort of midlife, just repetitive injuries plus a loss of estrogen coming to bear. And I do think that there's something to be said for, again, this being used as a red flag to like back it up a little bit and make sure that we're paying attention to ourselves. Because I think for those of us, and I would count myself among those people who tend to like push really, really hard. Obviously, if you injure yourself, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. And again, I'm not trying to like be like spiritually bypass and be like positive in some weird way, like, oh, it's awesome that you injured yourself. Now you get to do something else. Now, but I think understanding that and making sure that people are going into whatever their physical routine is with some knowledge that they're in a period of time where they're going to be more susceptible. And so they're going to need to be more careful about stretching, hydration, restoration, changing the kind of movements. I love, Gabriella, that you shared, just like restorative poses are so, so important. And actually, classically, they are recommended for women in this period of time because push, push, push is not what we really need to be doing. Yeah, but that's a real thing. And this kind of a full body achiness and people get blown off about this. They get dismissed. Oh, I did labs, your numbers are fine, you're having a regular period, you're fine. It's like you just walked in and told us that you're not fine. So that is a real thing. And there are things that we can do to protect ourselves. But the awareness is the first part.
And I think just keeping your body moving, right? And so on the platform, especially on the Menopause for Modern Life course, there are a number of classes that focus on bones and joints and mobility and balance. And so I would recommend everyone going and taking a look at those classes. They're not hardcore yoga poses or hardcore yoga routines, right? They're very balanced, very stability, very mobility focused classes. And sometimes it's the more subtle, gentler movements that are better for our bones and tissues than like the stronger kind of strong vinyasa, stronger, difficult poses.
Right.
And so really I recommend always kind of dialing your practice back a little bit when you're experiencing those aches and pains and really focusing on subtle movements, keeping the tissues and joints mobile and steady and stable. And there are a number of classes there that really facilitate that.
And I mean, listen, I'm not giving medical advice and the guidelines do not at this time support this, but for the right person at the right time, hormone therapy can be really wonderful. And again, there aren't guidelines that support musculoskeletal symptoms should be treated by hormone therapy. That's not what I'm saying, but we all do see anecdotally that many people who start some kind of hormone therapy will see improvements in some of these symptoms. But again, it always has to be lifestyle. And then what are we doing? I mean, whether it's other additive supplements, practices, none of these things are one size fits all. But it's a real thing. I think just at least acknowledging like, yeah, absolutely. This is a thing. This is a thing that I've seen. I've personally experienced this. And again, like I said, we're starting to see it more in the academic side.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate that. And Maria's got a very interesting sort of follow-on question is about pain in her hips. Me too. Even walking up the stairs is difficult sometimes. Yes. What's that about? Yeah, we're too young to feel decrepit. Absolutely, Maria.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I don't know. I can't diagnose. And I think if somebody's having like really significant impact on their activities of daily living, they do need to be seeing somebody because people also have injuries. People have I see somebody asking about inflammation and autoimmune. And we do know that this is an age group, midlife, where women tend to get diagnosed with autoimmune disorders. Also, we know that perimenopause and the rapid and unpredictable hormonal fluctuations do seem to contribute to flaring So people who, let's say, have a long-standing autoimmune disorder and have been pretty well stable may notice that things start to fluctuate and they flare. And I've had rheumatologists that I know who care for these patients also confirm this. So this is not to say like, I mean, yoga is an incredibly foundational, important practice. But if you're having a disruption, you do need to seek medical care, make sure nothing else is going on.
Yeah, no, that sounds really sensible. And also I love this Heather's question, which is, have inflammation and sore joints. Is there a link between perimenopause and autoimmune?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is a bit of a link. Are you able to just share a little bit more about that?
I mean, there's not a lot of data on it, but like I said, the age group that tends to be diagnosed most often with autoimmune disorders, so things like lupus, psoriatic arthritis, even like more thyroid Hashimoto's, Sjogren's, on and on and on. That's sort of the 35 to 65 is where a lot of women get diagnosed. And I think it's interesting that that is squarely where perimenopausal transition and then postmenopause occurs. And again, anecdotally, we do see that women who already have diagnoses, as they enter into perimenopause, seem to have more flaring. So that is a thing. I don't know that we understand it completely well, but I think understanding that estrogen receptor activity and estrogen is having action in all of the, all of our body, and now those levels are unstable. That does make sense intellectually. So again, if you have a family history, if you have a personal history, now is the time to start talking to your practitioners to make sure that you have an action plan and that you are making sure you're understanding what your needs might be and how they might change.
And I also recommend, because that was one of my initial symptoms also in perimenopause, was joint pain. And I was lucky to have an endocrinologist at the time who said, okay, we're going to send you off to a bone scan. It's the minute I said, I have achy joints. Okay, bone scan. And yeah, my bone scan did reveal that I had osteopenia. I had low-grade osteoporosis. So the main points that are mostly affected by osteopenia and osteoporosis are your neck, your lower back, and your hips, right? And so those were the three areas that I literally could see in a scan were experiencing some bone loss. And so that was a wake-up call for me, just being able to see that there was some actual proof that there was something there. So I always say, please get a baseline DEXA scan as soon as you start experiencing these, or even as you enter midlife, because it is perimenopause, it is menopause, it is a menopausal symptom, and just having a baseline of where you are now is important. And so that really got me to focus on protecting my joints and my bones and doing all the protocols to do that.
Well, again, and making these decisions in concert with a trusted practitioner, because osteoporosis doesn't always present with pain. Often it's silent. So in your case, it sounds like it correlated, but that's not always how that works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We do know that in the final couple of years leading up to menopause, which of course nobody could possibly know that when that's going to happen, but that's when bone loss starts to really accelerate. Now, people who are doing things that are weight bearing, and yoga could be one of those things, are really doing something beneficial for their bones in terms of preservation of bone health and maintenance of bone health. And as you mentioned, flexibility, stability, you want to be preventing the fall when you're 80, right? You want to know how to fall. And I think if you have that flexibility and that lower body strength, the upper body strength, and you've been doing that weight bearing that is helping to maintain the bone health, you're going to be in much better shape going forward. But again, these are all nuanced conversations that need to occur. Mm-hmm. And honestly, this kind of conversation helps the people on the call advocate for themselves. You all should not have to be making a diagnosis, and I'm not making a diagnosis. There's no way I can. I don't have a doctor-patient relationship with you. But if it flags something for you, you can bring it to your practitioner and say, hey, I've been reading, I've been learning, and I have questions about how do I maintain my bone health? Or I'm having hip pain. What should we be doing to exclude, an injury, a tear? I mean, there could be other things going on there. But again, advocating for yourself, because unfortunately, this stuff isn't always getting brought up until you bring it up. And sometimes you have to bring it up repeatedly.
Well, yes. And I really, really appreciate you saying that. And it's really interesting. Sasha has just shared, and I didn't know this. So thank you very much, Sasha, for sharing. If you're based in the UK or England, you can request a referral from a DEXA scan from your GP. And I did not know that. And I'm really glad that you let me know, because I'm really interested now. I know I haven't sort of joined the dots here, because I think all this is about joining dots, isn't it? It's like, oh, I've got hip pain. I've heard hip pain can be something to do with estrogen reducing, but I didn't join the dots that it might also be something to do with osteopenia. So it might be worth getting a scan to have a look at it, just to see what's going on. Yeah, just getting that information. So that's really cool.
And and estrogen replacement therapy, we know for a fact, and it is recommended in the prevention of osteoporosis and osteoporotic fractures. That is not controversial in the least. So sometimes when I have a patient who's got a constellation of symptoms and has other risk factors, they're a small framed person, they have a family history, they are or were a smoker, they have long-standing thyroid issues. Thyroid replacement contributes. There are a lot of other reasons why I really encourage them to get a bone density scan on the earlier side rather than the later side. In the US, our Preventative Services Task Force doesn't recommend getting a DEXA scan until like 60 something, which to me is crazy. Like, why are we waiting until you have osteoporosis? I'm not down with that at all. So we can have a conversation and do the DEXA scan. And then that helps us make some decisions, not just about lifestyle management, but about, are you candidate for hormone therapy? Because if you have osteopenia that's advancing, or maybe you're a borderline osteoporosis or even have early osteoporosis, I think it's indicated to start hormone therapy. I really do. So it helps us again. It's all these pieces of information that start with your story, start with your lived experience, that can help us get to what is going to work best for you, so that your experience through the transition and beyond is one of flourishing and thriving.
And it's so interesting, because I think this conversation, exactly as Sasha has said, if we don't know and we're not offered it by the GP, and they don't offer things, you have to be informed and say, I've got this. You know what? It took me 4 years to go to my GP about this stuff, because that's kind of the way that we are. We're like, well, it's just a little thing. And well, it's just me being that, we can always sort of negate it with other stuff and other stories. And it's really hard to know what to ask for if you don't know. So that was a really useful conversation about osteopenia and the bone scans and getting a base scan. I did not know that. That's great. That's really useful. Karen said in UK, bone scans through the NHS are people with other risk factors, not purely menopause. That's interesting. So it's worth talking to a doctor about that, to your doctor. Heather's asked, are there any protocols to recommend around osteopenia? Well, you've mentioned the bone density building exercises, the sort of yoga type exercises. And of course, there are plenty of those on our Movement for Modern Life course. But would you be able to share any protocols? Or I know that you're a little bit wary of doing that in a sort of, because everybody's different, right?
Well, in terms of lifestyle, I mean, honestly, lifting heavy. Don't just go in the gym. I mean, no one's doing this, are they? And start lifting heavy things if you've never done that before. You're going to hurt yourself. But things like farmer carry, I don't know if you guys know what that is, where you literally, in both hands, hold equally weighted weights and do them as heavy as you can, or a kettlebell or something, and walk. That has been shown. Walking with weights or a weighted vest, jumping, anything that is putting pressure on your bones safely is going to have an impact on helping to maintain bone density. Vitamin D levels are very, very important. You need to get your vitamin D, 25 hydroxy D level measured. I don't know like reference ranges for you guys, because I'm sure you might do them a little bit differently. But I will tell you that often our reference ranges include something pretty low or normal. And I think most of us who really do this medicine think it needs to be higher. So those are some things that you can be doing. Calcium on its own is not a thing, doesn't work. And I think getting a balanced diet and all the things that we know, sleep and rest and all that stuff. And then hormone therapy can be part of the management strategies, specifically estrogen. And that's something you would need to discuss with your own physician or practitioner.
Yeah, that's super cool. Really lovely to hear you say that. Yeah, I've started to take a supplement for bone support, and it includes shed loads of vitamin D.
Yeah.
I think that's
That's really the main thing. I mean, there's some data on strontium and some other. Honestly, the data is not that strong in these areas. And the reason I say it's not that it's not like calcium isn't helpful, but calcium alone is not it. All of these minerals act as cofactors. They need each other. So calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D together. I mean, I don't want to get too fancy here. But and I also think that the more we start getting into like, oh, here's the magic listicle of the things that the 5 things you need to do to not have osteoporosis. Okay, come on. I'm not doing that. I think you don't know me yet. Gabriella does. But like, that's not my thing. Like, I will give you like, I think things that might be helpful, but it isn't that simple. And honestly, the more we dial back, do the things that we're actually going to do on a regular basis, the more effective we're going to be, because we can go out and spend all the money on all the stuff and it's sitting in the corner and that's not doing anything for you. Whereas if your mat is there and you have a practice, that's something you're actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Oh, and we've got a question about ADHD. And I hate to make this the cat show, but it's now the cat show because I also have ADHD. And I did have that before. And I think my symptoms are, I don't know, bettering, worsening. It depends how you feel about it. But do you know, Dr. Suzanne, anything about the link between ADHD and perimenopause, menopause?
I feel like what's just started to kind of come out, and I have a lot of questions because I think that there's a combination of events going on here. One is that ADHD and ADD in women and girls has really been underdiagnosed and underreported. So I think there's like a lot of catching up. I also think this is what I tell my patients every day. Perimenopause affects everything, but everything isn't perimenopause. There's a distinction. That also means that hormone therapy, if we're just going to be really focused, is probably going to be helpful for a lot of stuff, but probably not for everything. So I know I'm obfuscating to a certain extent because we don't understand all of it. I do think that a lot of, and I see Sasha's made some comments around mood and stuff. I think that some of what's going on with cognition, attention is probably hormone related. We know that hormones have a massive impact in the brain, and that's not just estrogen, that's testosterone and progesterone. They turn on and off all sorts of neurotransmitter lines and communications. And I think if you add in the feeling of not feeling like myself, feeling lost, feeling isolated, not sleeping well, having a mood disorder now that's like, is it a mood disorder? Is it perimenopause? Is it PMS? Like, I mean, of course, you're going to feel like you have ADHD or ADD, and maybe you do, and you had it the whole time, and now it's just unmasked. I don't have an answer for that, and I don't think science has an answer for that yet either. But I'm suspicious that sort of like how in the last 20 years, when people stopped using hormone therapy, everybody started getting antidepressants for their anxiety and depression. And I'm here to say, thank God for antidepressants. Thank God for medication. I just told you I practice conventional medicine. But, you know, if you look at our wonderful colleague Heidi Flagg made this incredible graphic showing in the United States the drop off from 80 or 90 million prescriptions of hormone replacement therapy plummeting, and after 2002, after the Women's Health Initiative. And guess what? Increased at pretty much the same level as hormone therapy prescriptions went down, antidepressants. Okay. So a lot of the mood disorders that we see, or the exacerbation in mood that we see in perimenopause, is absolutely related to perimenopause and to hormones. So they aren't mutually exclusive. I don't think, everybody should be doing hormones, or everybody should be doing nothing, or everybody should be doing antidepressants. But I think we need to have a more thorough discussion. And I think that that's the case with ADHD. So it's complex. This is why, again, we have to advocate for ourselves and have a partner in our healthcare journey who will be creative and evolve with us and with the times. If meds for ADHD or ADHD practices help a person, great. But let's not forget the context.
Really, really interesting. And Carla's just sharing, peri-symptoms are a nightmare for me as autistic. Spend too much time tuning in as you notice and feel every slight change.
Wow, that's, that is a huge, huge important black box too. I think people who are neurodivergent are just really suffering, and they're in a very marginalized community in many ways as it is. So Carla, thank you so much for that comment. I had the absolute honor and pleasure to work with a woman who had a physical disability, chronic medical condition after a major accident, and her perimenopause got buried. Her menopause got buried in that because she was like in the disabled situation and nobody realized to ask her what was going on with her perimenopause and menopause. And it was astonishing. And there are, large segments. I mean, if the average person walking down the street who's going through perimenopause or menopause is basically getting ignored, people who are in communities have less access are getting even more ignored. So thank you for that comment. And I hope that my comment helped you, right? Again, because any little piece of information that helps us validate our experience and tune into, okay, so how do I downregulate the anxiety around it and move forward to ask for help is going to benefit you.
Absolutely. And that's sort of your response sort of circle back, because you mentioned the chronic illness sort of crossover as well, which we've got a question from Angela from Devon. Thank you very much, Angela, for writing. You're constantly learning about the crossover between chronic illness, especially chronic fatigue, and perimenopause. And isn't that interesting? So, it's so hard to unpick things.
It is, but you know what? Everything isn't easy. And I think the other thing that we have to remember and understand is that I keep saying this, and maybe let me be more clear and put a finer point on it. You need to make your healthcare practitioner a partner. They don't know everything either. I don't know everything. I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to be creative. I'm willing to help you figure out what are your goals. And they're going to evolve over time, especially when we're talking about perimenopause. That's not a fixed experience. Could be a decade long, and it's going to change all the time. So we have got to be in this together. And that includes practitioners understanding what they don't know and being willing to be humble and learn with each other. And you coming in as a person who's going through something, I know it's hard to put more emotional labor on you, but I'm going to do it, because if you want to get the help that you need to come to this person that you're asking help for and understand that the burdens of their daily life and their professional pressures and the lack of training and education or support that they have to provide this kind of care. And if you guys are a team, you're going to learn together. That's a lot of how I learned this, was from just saying to my patients, I don't know, let's try to figure it out.
And I think going in, if I can just add to that as a patient myself, going in with a set of questions, right? Writing down, keeping track of your symptoms, as you mentioned at the very beginning, going in with a set of questions, and then knowing that maybe if all your questions aren't addressed in that one consultation, because doctors do not have a lot of time, making another appointment, a follow-up appointment to address the other thing. So don't think that you're going to get everything addressed in one consultation. Maybe go prioritize what you want to talk about in that one consultation, and then make an appointment to then say, I'm going to come back and talk to you about this.
Exactly. I have a couple of pages of advocacy and like sample questions and stuff in the book so that you can sort of prepare exactly in that way. Prepare yourself. What are my goals today? And how can I make this person my partner? And how can we plan ahead to create this relationship that is going to evolve over time so that I'm going to get what I need? That's such good advice, Gabriella. Such good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really, really useful. And I just want to talk about a couple of people have mentioned anxiety. And Louise, thank you so much for sharing. You've been severely anxious and exhausted, but you don't know if that's something to do with your mum dying, bless you. And then COVID, hated working from home, and it was so isolating, and then itchy skin. And I understand, because sometimes there are so many different things going on. It's so hard to separate out what's going on. And I know that anxiety is something that does happen to a lot of us when we're in perimenopause and menopause. What's that about, Dr. Suzanne?
Well, I think if this person this would be a great person to look at her cycle tracking, because it's probably all of those things. You know what I mean? But if it's like a baseline that gets exacerbated at ovulation and or from ovulation until menstruation or premenstrually, if they're still having a fairly regular cycle, then there is a hormonal contribution. If it's sort of waking up with dread every day, and then it's probably more related to just the mental health stuff, which is pretty significant there. So I think, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know what the answer to almost anybody is when they come in. But the more data points we have, the more we're going to be able to sort of dig into what a solution might be. And I hope that that person is getting some support and help, because that's a lot of things to go through. And, it's fairly typical midlife where we have perimenopause and menopause. And this is when all these other big events start happening. Work starts getting really stressful, or we start feeling like we can't perform the same. We have aging parents or aging relatives. If we have kids, our kids are going through stuff. Maybe they're teenagers. Maybe they're trying to, become their own person. I mean, on and on and on. And it's a lot of stress to be put on a person who doesn't feel her most resilient, and who also is sort of like tired of taking care of everybody else and really wants to focus on herself. And that, look, that is not the reality for all of us, but we do have to find ways to draw some lines and put ourselves on the to-do list. Because if we continue to not include ourselves in our needs, we're not doing anybody any favors, certainly not ourselves.
And if I can just add to that, as someone who experiences anxiety, is just, just admitting that you have anxiety, right? I'm feeling anxious. I have anxiety. So for so long, that was viewed as sort of a mental health taboo that we didn't talk about. So I love that we're talking about it more. I share with people all the time when I'm feeling anxious, so they know if if I'm talking too quickly or if my behavior is a little off. I'm feeling anxious about something, but something that's helped me is, and you mentioned this, Dr. Suzanne, is in terms of the root causes, is really leaning in. I always say, lean into your anxiety from a place of curiosity and compassion to listen and learn what it's trying to say to us. How, our anxiety in the end is trying to protect us, right? So how can we lean into that anxiety, and what is it really trying to tell us? Is it trying to tell us that I didn't get enough food? Sometimes for me, it's if I don't have enough protein, if I haven't resourced myself with enough protein, I start feeling anxious. Or if I'm about to do a live webinar, like I was doing 10 minutes, before I joined this, it was like, I started to feel that. I'm like, okay, all right, I did, I was leaning into it. Okay, Gabriella, you're feeling nervous because of you're going live with Dr. Suzanne, an expert in menopause care. But I just lean in and listen to that anxiety and try not to brush it off, lean into the practices. I developed a class. There's a class on the portal called Vagus Nerve Practices for Anxiety Relief. And it's really about, okay, where am I feeling that anxiety? Bringing your hands to your body, breathing, talking, listening, and really showing yourself some compassion as a relief in the moment. And of course, you can take that to your doctor. I feel the anxiety here and my chest as, this gripping feeling or heart palpitations. And, again, you can take that conversation to your health practitioner, but don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. Don't make yourself feel broken. Really lean into it and see what it's trying to tell you.
That's so powerful. And I think when people like yourself say that out loud, you're giving other people permission to discuss it themselves. And I think this brings up a really important point. And one of the things that we started the conversation with, which is sort of this not feeling like myself and this loss of self, this loss of who am I? But if who we are is, excuse my French, full of shit perfection that we are presenting, is that really who we want to be? I don't think I want to do that anymore. And I think I did go through all of that, where we have this presentation of nothing bothers us and we can do it all and we have no needs. And oh my God, what is that? That is nonsense. So maybe perimenopause and menopause comes to visit us to break that open and say, hey, that's not good for you. Stop it. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. I was like, look, I'm a surgeon. I have a huge practice. I raised 2 children. I was doing television, in the community what was I not doing? And my mid 40s, I'm a person who never had PMS that I remembered. Oh my God. It was through the roof. Insane. I was so agitated. I was so dark. I was exhausted, all these things. And it took me a while to even recognize it. And other things happened. You can read my book if you're really that interested. But I got breast cancer. I got divorced. Talk about blowing it up. And would I recommend the experience? Not really, but it's not that uncommon that happens. And can I tell you where I am now? Like, so good. It's so good. But I had to go through some hell and I had to reach for support because I was the support. I was the fixer. So who was I if I wasn't fixing? And I had to learn how to ask for help. And I really did. And it changed my life. And all of these amazing things happened as a result of me being real. So for those of you who are struggling, please, please, please hear this, that your struggle does not need to be in vain. And you, if nothing else, you have this community. Oh my God, hugely important.
That's so beautiful. And it's so lovely to hear the shares. And I can see that we're inspiring people with your honesty and being open about it and being okay, not being okay, and being okay, not feeling ourselves. And going back to Maria's comment at the top, I feel shattered too often, losing confidence and motivation. Those are also things that are so common. And I'm now going to just chime in on the motivation, because I've actually developed some boundaries since since getting perimenopause, and that was one of the biggest bodybuilding exercises I did. And I had never ever, I was a appeaser, I was always, doing the right thing, and and now I have some boundaries, and it's actually very interesting. I realized that I was also lacking motivation, and I think a lot of it was I was just sick of the BS. I just had enough. And when that sort of went away, I felt more motivated, because the little world that I've created is a world which I'm happier with. It's not the world which I was growing up in, which was on everybody else's terms, and I had to be the goody goody. And I think it's a powerful time. It's a time of coming into our power and saying no to the crap. And that for me is a reading of some of the motivation stuff. Do you have thoughts on this, Dr. Suzanne?
Oh my God, it's my experience. And I do think, like I said, I think there's something healthy in it as long as we don't go into the depths alone, because there's nothing good about that. I mean, human beings are tribal. We're meant to be with each other. I think for a variety of reasons, we have our social structures and our ancient ways as women, in terms of educating and supporting and moving through things with each other, whether it's the red tent or whatever. Every culture has a way that women communicate. And, the difficult but the beautiful thing about the internet and the lockdown was that people were forced online. And now we have to figure out how to continue to, create these communities that are sustainable and that are nourishing, because we really need them. We really need each other. I mean, what you're doing and the fact that it has lasted and grown this way for over a decade says everything. Gabriella's reach, my reach, the fact that my menopause boot camp became a thing and people needed it says everything about what we need and what we can do for one another. I will say, for those of you who are called to continue to do this kind of work, I mean, all of us on this panel have offerings, but I do have a certification program where you can learn how to become a menopause bootcamp facilitator. This is not how to treat menopause. This is how to be in menopause. So it's all the stuff we're talking about. And because now I think we have a lot in common, right? I come from yoga and meditation and Ayurveda. A lot of that informs what I bring to bear in that teaching. So you can follow me and learn about that. But I do think the message here is, yes, not feeling like yourself is a real thing. It is a difficult journey. And yes, there is something really beautiful waiting for you at the end of the journey. But I don't think we should be journeying on our own. I don't think we're meant to do that.
Yeah, too right. Absolutely. Oh, it's just lovely to hear the resources available to folks. And you're absolutely right. It's like none of us can do this alone. And it's like you need to build up your own little army of people. And, my army is the community for sure. And I also have a shiatsu practitioner. So, it's nice having body care people who can help. Gabriella, you also run a community as well of folks helping as well.
No, for sure. I have my own community. I have a Facebook group, and it's incredible just having like you said, Dr. Suzanne, and having a safe space where people can share, just like they've been sharing here in this feed. I'm so touched by how open people are with sharing their personal experiences, and sometimes just being able to do that, right? To be seen, to be heard. is enough, right? Is enough to help you and support you on your journey. And so, yeah, definitely creating spaces, the menopause bootcamp certification that Dr. Suzanne mentions, which I'm supposed to finish soon. I'm supposed to finish it. So I'll be able to go into my community and offer it as well. Just facilitate, just create circles to hear and listen to what people have to say and share, because everyone, as I say, everyone's stories matter, and just giving space for that is so important, so that you feel you're not alone.
Absolutely. If I can, the final question from Karen, because we haven't really mentioned this. Karen in Scotland, thank you so much. Age 62, in theory through it, but it's still having an impact. Are you able to just share for a little bit about how long is this going to go on for?
Well, I mean, I don't know what's going on with her, but menopause is the one day that you reach those 12 consecutive months without a menstrual cycle, right? Postmenopause is the rest of your life. And so you are in a changed state. And I think depending on what your experience of that transition was and what kind of support you are getting, and I mean support in all ways, mind, body, and spirit, is going to depend how the rest of your life is going to be. And I think one of the problems with denying care and not offering a full range of options of therapeutics, whether it's lifestyle, herbs, medicines, hormones, that's why that is a problem to not get all those offerings, because it's not like this is an interesting thing that it took me a while to realize. A lot of people misunderstand, oh, I'm going to be going through this and then it'll be done. Well, maybe the hot flashes and the worst of it may or may not be done for you. There's a small percentage of people who continue to have hot flashes in their 70s, okay? But the change to your body is you're not going back to 40. So if you don't have practices, or you were denied hormone therapy when you could have used it, it's going to have a continued impact. So I don't know exactly what's going on with her, and I hope that she will be motivated to seek help. But again, I don't want to lean too heavily on one or another kind of treatment, because not everybody needs to do anything and not everybody needs to do the same thing. But doing nothing and having no information is definitely not going to be helpful. And I think for our community members who are a little further down the road in all this, who didn't have access to this kind of conversation 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, I'm having a lot of patients come into me really bereft, really upset and angry because they feel cheated, and they were cheated. They were cheated. And we just have to repair and acknowledge that happened, and what can we do going forward? Try to do better.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much. And like you said, you've been so open, everybody, with sharing your thoughts, sharing your honesty, sharing your experiences. And I so appreciate you, Dr. Suzanne and Gabriella, for being able to be here, to hear us, to answer, and to start talking about it, and to thinking about things maybe a little bit differently. I think it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. So thank you, everybody, so much. And ending on the note from Suzanne, women need to be kinder to themselves.
I love it. Agreed. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a special, important conversation, and what an incredible community. Thanks for having me with you.
Thank you, Dr. Suzanne. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Hit the share episode button and send it to a friend, or post it on your Instagram stories and tag me, Gabriella Espinosa. And if you really love this podcast, please leave a rating or review, as this helps the show get in front of new listeners. Finally, if you would like to access even more pleasure and stay in touch, sign up for my free Pleasure Upgrade bundle of powerful mind-body practices by going to pleasureinthepause.com. Remember, your pleasure matters.